And this guy was slapping around his girlfriend on the corner, and I decided, against my better judgment, or should say wisdom, to stop and, hey, like, chill out, man, leave her alone. Which obviously I wouldn't do nowadays, because I learned that all that did was turn the guy on me, and I ended up hammering him pretty good.
So after college, what did you end up doing? Before the UFC, how does this progression happen where you end up to the UFC? Because I know you applied for several years before you got in.
Well, it wasn't really several years, it's a year. My mother would never let me box. And she's like, absolutely no way, because of CTE and Muhammad Ali, you're going to end up like that. And she's like, nope, nope, nope. And then, I was like, after high school, 18, I was the family pet, and my mom was like, don't leave me at home with your dad, please. And so I'm like, what the hell? I want to box. And there used to be an old school boxing gym in Westminster, which was adjacent to Huntington. And I was always tempted to go in there, and a lot of big names went through there. And a guy that I was still milling around. I actually graduated from college, but I was like a career college student. I was having a great time, boy.
I know I was there as well too.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want life to end, man. I was like, I could do this. All the girls, everything, And so I was at a party, and back in those days, there were like house parties, and people's parents would leave, and everybody from the neighborhood would be in there drinking beers and all that kind of stuff. And I ran into some younger kids, a couple years younger than me, that had gone off to college at San Luis Obispo. And they stumbled into a boxing gym up there. And they're like, dude, yeah, we started boxing. And I go, I always wanted to box. And they go, why don't you come up, see our place? You can stay there overnight, that kind of thing. And I'll introduce you to my boxing trainer. I'm like, sure, why not? I was kind of, believe it or not, when I'm like a shy guy, I didn't want to impose myself on people and that kind of thing. So they made it very comfortable. And so within a couple of weeks, I ended up going up to outside of San Luis Obispo, Morro Bay area. I believe it was Atascadero, all little towns around San Luis Obispo. And we went to this boxing gym. It was nothing more than a ring and some bags. Nothing old or extravagant or anything like that, nostalgia-wise. And we went in there, and there's a very famous boxer from the early 70s, heavyweight boxer. It doesn't matter. I don't want to talk about gyms. But anyways, he was the nephew of this guy. And he had 8 pro fights. And if you watch these reels and stuff like that, and these guys learn a skill, whether it be wrestling, boxing, or any type of martial art, and they like, oh, this guy thinks he's tough, and then they get in there and they put him in a thing, and they use their skill set to beat up the tough guy. So that was the situation, and they're like, oh, this guy thinks he's tough. Let's get him in here with sparring with this guy. His first name was Bobby. And let's get him in here with Bobby. And they're like all nodding their head with a big smile on his face. He thinks he's a tough guy. Yeah, get him in there. And so I go, and they go, you ever sparred before? And I go, nothing serious by any means. not, maybe out in front playing around with my friend. And next thing you know, they're going, no, no, no. They were all waiting to watch the tough guy get beat up. They went and got me a mouthpiece, and they used coffee to mold it. And they put me in there, and it didn't work out the way they thought it would. And I pretty much gave them a shellacking. I just said, what the hell is a street fight? I don't know how to box. I'm not going to sit out here and box. I'm just going to throw the dogs, lay my ears back, and just go for it. And I ended up taking it to him. And everybody's like, oh my God, what the hell did we just see? And I left, went back home, and my friend's calling me up, and he's like, hey, you need to go down to Westminster Boxing Gym. And at the time, Tyrell Biggs was in there, and I walked in, and his trainer was Matt Kirihara, old Japanese guy, looked like the guy from what's the movie called? Karate Kid movie or something like
Mr. Miyagi.
Yes. He looked, believe it or not, it's like a movie. But anyways, he's like, yeah, sure, kid. He had like an attitude like a mafia guy or something. And he's, I'll train you. Well, he trained me for like a day or two. And then he kicked me down to one of his little satellite guys. And Jimmy, I think his name was. And he was showing me how to throw a hook and stuff. And I said, hey, well, I want to fight. When's the next fight? And he goes, well, it's like in 6 weeks. And I go, all right. I was doing my road work, getting up, running, doing all that kind of stuff. He goes, you can't do that. And I'm like, why not? He goes, you don't even know how to box yet. You can't get in and have a boxing match. And I'm like, well, that's what I'm in here for. I don't care. And they're like, well, if you want to do it, you can do it, but I strongly suggest you don't. And so I said, well, I'm going to do it. And so the fight came down. It was like 6 weeks later, and it was a heavyweight bout. And this guy fought. His name is Gary. And the only reason why I know it because I have them all on videotapes, and everybody's going. His dad was going, "Come on, Gary, come on!" Anyways, I ended up taking it to him, and his mouthpiece fell out, and he was wobbly leg, almost fell out of the ring. And at the time, the guy that ran the gym was a guy named Noe Cruz. He's an old Mexican guy, taller. He's like 6'2", but he was the trainer for Carlos Palomino. And so he goes, I want to train you. And I'm like, well, I'm with Mac. And he goes, let me talk to Mac. And so that was a couple days. And then he talked to Mac, and Mac said, I don't have time. I'm with Tyrell. He goes, we'll split whatever you get with this guy. That's how it went down in the boxing business back in the day. And me being white and a heavyweight, the dollar wheels were spinning in their eyeballs. And he's like, this guy doesn't have what anybody can learn to box, he would say, but you have things you can't teach. And so he took me under his wing, and thank God he did. The guy is a mastermind of the sweet science, and taught me how to box. And I took out a few people. My last fight I cut down to was 199, like heavyweight at the time. Nobody would fight me. So I said, well, I'm not gonna just fight anybody, not fight. I'll fight heavyweight. And so I ended up fighting a guy that was 248. And I thought I won the fight, but he won the fight. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? I have that on tape also. And then 2 weeks later, I saw him on Tuesday Night Fights with a pro fight thing, and these were amateur fights I was fighting, and everything clicked. Like, oh, this is what's going on. They weren't going to give him, they weren't going to let me win and then have him fight turn pro on TV 2 weeks later after a loss. And so that was that.
Surely you're not saying boxing. Surely you're not saying boxing could be fixed, are you?
I missed that. The dogs.
Sorry, I said surely you're not saying that boxing could be fixed with the judges, could you?
Oh yeah, that's exactly. It became crystal clear at that time.
At that time, yeah.
And then they have a boxing a book that shows your fights. And two of them, they marked down because you had to turn them into the refs. They marked down that I lost. And I was like, what? Who cares? I had it on videotape with me putting my hand over my head and the whole 9 yards. And it kind of soured me about boxing, but it was kind of like, yeah, this is what I figured. So that is going on. And then I worked at a liquor store when I was going to college. That also helped. My free booze was also part of my college lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so on the way home from work, and I used to I'd go in there, do my homework, and then eat dinner from one of the restaurants around I was on a main street in a beach town. And then I would start drinking beers and watch TV. And so on the way home from that, it was a beach town. It was kind of over dark, and it was overcast, cloudy. And this guy was slapping around his girlfriend on the corner. And I decided, against my better judgment, or should say wisdom, to stop and, hey, like, chill out, man, leave her alone, which obviously I wouldn't do nowadays, because I learned that all that did was turn the guy on me, and I ended up hammering him pretty good. And turns out his stepdad was a detective. And so he wanted my ass thrown in jail because, he didn't do anything. I just decided to stop on the way home from work and beat him up with his girlfriend there. So I took it to court. If I was guilty of beating somebody up, I would have said, take my lumps and throw me in jail. But it was all put me in jail scene. I kind of felt like Donald Trump for a second. And I'm like, what? This is like a kangaroo court. It was unbelievable. And so I got sent to jail for that. And my mother used to work, she's no longer alive, but she used to work for the county, and the sheriffs she used to do all the retirement for everybody in the county. So the sheriffs were county employees. She would do your retirement. So I went to jail. She got me through jail as lightly as I could. They gave me 180 days.
How old were you? How old were you, Tech?
I was just cruising around 28-ish. Like I said, I stretched college out for a long time. And I ended up being able to go to the boxing gym. I went in to do 180 days, and they kicked me out to probation, where I did a halfway house. And during the day, I could go to the boxing gym for 3 hours, as well as work. And so I was in the boxing gym, and I would tell Noy, the trainer guy, I'd go, man, you don't understand. This isn't real fighting. I'm telling you, I kill these guys. You take a wrestling room and take it over to the boxing gym and say, who wants to fight? I go, the boxing gym guys, all the boxers will run and get on the payphone and call the cops and go, help us. And I go, you turn the tables and you take the wrestlers to the boxing, or the boxers to the wrestling room and say there's a bunch of boxers outside. I go, everybody be fighting to get out the door to beat them up.
Right.
So that goes on while I'm working at the halfway house, working for my friend who had a medical clothing manufacturing company, like a warehouse, a cut and sew. And he goes, hey, have you seen this Ultimate Fighting, my friend? I saw advertisements for it in Playboy at the liquor store. And I go, it's got to be professional wrestling. It's got to be all fake bullshit, you know? And he's like, no, 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 this is real. And he goes, this guy named Chemo, the bouncer, and I had quite the reputation back in the day around the town. He goes, he's a bouncer at this bar that we used to go to all the time. And the guy comes, gets you out of line and says, Mr. Abbott, this way, sir. I go, that guy fought in the UFC. He's like, yeah. And I go, I guess anybody can. He goes, yeah. He goes, would you do it if I get you in it? And I said, sure. You'll never do it, but go ahead. And this guy is a loudmouth kind of guy that I could never dream of being. But one of those guys that just keep pestering you on the phone. Hey, 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 I got this fighter. So he was calling the UFC offices and telling them about me. And I ended up going there. And the guy that was running the thing said, oh, yeah, we hear about you Street Fighter guys all the time. He goes, well, no, I'm telling you, this guy really is. So we go to the office there finally, and I still was like, this is never going to happen. Go there, and he says, hey, well, we got this 6'8" guy for you to fight out in front, and he's 300 pounds. So I brought my grocery bag. That's back when they were still paper, with my high top shoes and a change of clothes. And I walked in there and we talked, and he goes, well, what do you do? And I go, I've been wrestling forever. And he goes, yeah, he goes, well, we got Dan Severn and we got wrestlers and we're just looking for, you know, whoever. And I'm going, well, I'm not really, I've been in hundreds of wrestling rooms. And I go, I'm not really a wrestler. He goes, what do you mean? I go, I really fight. I don't just think about how I can kick your ass. I go, if you want to go, we'll go. And he's like, yeah. And I go, in fact, I just got out of jail in a halfway house for fighting here. And he goes, yeah. And he goes, well, let me see what we can do with you. And it was the same scenario as like the boxing gym thing. Oh, yeah, we've heard about you guys. And then on the way out, he goes, what's in your bag there? And I go, well, you said you had somebody for me to fight. 6'8", 300-pound guy. And he goes, you'd do that? And I go, as long as I don't go to jail, sure. And he's like, oh, wow. So a week or two goes by and he calls up and he goes, hey, we need to see you again. We have an idea. So I guess he did some checking around. And at the time, Big John McCartney was the ref, was a cop. And he asked around Huntington and everything else, and he's like, oh no, that guy's really for real. He does do all that kind of stuff. So he goes, we came up with this thing, this name. Have you ever seen the movie Any Which Way But Loose with Clint Eastwood?
Right.
I go, I live movies, man. I don't watch them. And he goes, well, there's an orangutan in there, and it's Milo, some whatever. I subsequently have watched it, but he's a friend with an orangutan, and he goes and fights a street fighting legend named Tank Murdoch. And he goes, we want to call you Tank. I'm like looking at him. I go, dude, you can call me what? You can call me Lucy. I don't care as long as I don't go to jail and you let me fight. I'm down for it. He goes, okay, you're going to be Tank Abbott, the real life Tank Murdoch, the street fighting legend. Sounds good to me. And so I went to the next show, and the Gracies owned 1 through 5, unbeknownst to me at the time. So it was kind of set up who they invited to the show as far as skills and how they matched up. So I went to the show, and I actually got kicked out, but I got a wrestling buddy worked for Club Sportswear. I was a big time volleyball clothing company at the time, and they decided to sponsor me, and they got me a ticket to go watch the last of the Gracies 5, UFC 5 in Carolina. And went there, checked it out, raised a bunch of hell with Jim Brown and all the fighters. I saw Dan Severn, and he had just lost to Gracie, I believe. It was a million years ago. And we were in the same elevator, and I was out having fun. And we're going up the elevator, and I said, hey, aren't you Dan? And I don't know if you guys know Dan or not, but I call him Baby Huey. It's kind of a goofy kind of guy like that. And I said, hey, man, you let wrestling down, amateur wrestling down, man. I cannot believe that. How could you do that? And, he's like, oh. And I'm like, you do that again, I'm going to have to kill you. And he just looked at me like I was some crazy mark or something.